She only meant to pass by a quiet teacher, a quiet street, and a quiet spring evening in Maple Hollow. But something made her stop. A German shepherd, mud-caked ribs showing, sat unmoving on a manhole, refusing to eat, unless it was to feed the darkness beneath. And when she finally leaned in to see what he was protecting, the silence broke her heart. Maple Hollow in early spring was a picture of quiet resurrection. Nestled between pine-covered ridges and winding creeks in the southern valleys of Vermont, the town often looked like a page torn from a postcard except when the rain came. That evening, as the last pale ribbons of sunlight pulled away from the cracked sidewalks of Appleby Street, the rain had only recently stopped, leaving behind a sheen that turned every puddle into a mirror. The scent of wet soil and maple bark lingered in the air, while the sky above remained smeared in lavender and pearl gray. Callie Monroe, 33, paced briskly along the sidewalk, her canvas tote heavy with groceries thudding softly against her leg. She was average in height, lean with a wiry kind of strength earned from a life of quiet persistence. Her auburn hair was tied in a loose bun, though a few strands had escaped and clung to her cheeks in the damp breeze. There was a softness in her gray eyes, but also a shadow, a deep-set weariness that had never quite lifted since her father passed away 5 years ago. He had been a local sheriff, well-loved and remembered especially for his bond with his K-9 partner. The two had been inseparable. Since his death, Callie had kept mostly to herself, her world orbiting around her third-grade classroom and the little red house she inherited just off Lily Birch Lane. She had just turned the corner of Appleby and Main, distracted by thoughts of lesson plans and unfinished grading, when her steps faltered. There, about 15 feet ahead, directly on top of a circular iron manhole cover, sat a dog. Not just any dog. A large German shepherd, its fur matted and streaked with mud, its body perfectly still but visibly tense. Its ears twitched with every sound, but its eyes, amber and alert, were locked on the grate beneath its paws, as though the world beneath the manhole held more meaning than the one above it. Callie froze. The dog's ribs pushed faintly against its coat, not in the skeletal way of starvation, but enough to suggest neglect. The pads of its front paws rested precisely on the outer lip of the manhole cover, and its tail curled protectively around its body. Raindrops still clung to its fur, forming glimmering beads that rolled down its flanks. It didn't look up, didn't move, only watched. Callie swallowed and instinctively reached into her bag. Among oranges and a loaf of seeded rye was a pouch of turkey jerky meant for her own dinner plans, but it would serve. She knelt slowly, mindful of sudden movements, and spoke softly. "Hey there, buddy. You okay?" The shepherd lifted its head, but did not growl. Instead, it sniffed the air and tilted its head, studying her as though calculating her intent. It didn't approach, it didn't run, it simply waited. Carefully, Callie placed a strip of jerky on the wet pavement between them, then backed away a step. The dog looked at the food, then unexpectedly picked it up in its jaws and carried it to the edge of the manhole. With a delicate movement, it dropped the meat through the narrow slits of the grate. Callie blinked. The shepherd turned back and repeated the process again and again, until every last piece of jerky was gone, not consumed, not hoarded, but offered into the darkness below. A silence settled between them, thick and vibrating with the strangeness of the act. The dog gave a small, almost inaudible whine, then resumed its vigil, lowering itself into a guarding crouch. "What are you doing?" Callie whispered more to herself than to the animal. She stepped closer just enough to peer over the dog's shoulder and into the grate, but the interior was pitch black save for the glint of residual water and the faint echo of something movement. A sound. It was impossible to tell. Still, crouched, the shepherd's head snapped toward her and let out a single low growl. Not threatening, but clear, "Do not go further." Callie raised her hands in surrender. "Okay, got it." The dog returned its gaze downward. For a long minute, she stood there drenched in wonder, and the growing chill of dusk, unsure of what to do. Then a small voice behind her broke the spell. "Hey, Miss Monroe." A boy of about 10 stood with his bike a few feet away. Nathan, one of her more curious students. His jacket was zipped halfway and his freckles were brighter than usual against the dampness of his face. "Is that your dog?" Callie shook her head. "No, I think he's watching over something." Nathan squinted. "That's weird. Dogs don't usually do that unless they're trained for it." "Maybe he's a cop. Dog. Maybe," she said quietly. Nathan remained still for a moment, then offered, "You want me to call someone?" Callie considered it. She glanced at the darkened windows around them. The pet clinic had closed at 5. Animal control in Maple Hollow wasn't exactly responsive after hours. She looked back at the dog and felt a strange conviction coil in her chest. No, not yet. Nathan nodded and rode off his bike wheels hissing in the wet. Left alone, Callie pulled her jacket tighter. Her thoughts raced about what might be under that grate, about the strange stillness of the dog, and about how the world sometimes delivers you to moments that feel impossibly bigger than they should be. The shepherd's silence was not apathy. It was intentional. Protective. She took one last look at the grate, then at the dog. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said, not expecting an answer. "Promise." She turned and walked home, unaware that just around the corner under the broken wooden porch of a long-abandoned shed, someone else had been watching from the shadows. The next morning arrived with a hush. Maple Hollow woke under a thin veil of fog, and the streets shimmered from the night's dew. A faint golden sun hovered low above the ridge, struggling to pierce the mist that clung stubbornly to treetops and rooftops. Callie Monroe stood in her kitchen, wrapping a woolen blanket with careful precision. She had packed water in a thermos and tucked some leftover roast chicken into a small container. There was something about the way the German shepherd had sat guarding, not surviving, that had stayed with her all night. Dreams had come in fragments, her father's old canine partner barking into the dark, her classroom empty, her voice echoing across linoleum floors. She stepped outside, boots sinking slightly in the damp earth of her front yard, and made her way down Appleby Street again. The quiet still lingered. Her breath came in clouds. The neighborhood hadn't yet stirred, save for the occasional flapping of a jay's wings or the distant purr of a pickup engine. As she turned the corner, the figure on the manhole was still there, unchanged, yet subtly different. The dog had not moved much, but his posture was wearier, more slouched. His tail flicked slowly when he saw her, and this time he didn't growl when she approached. "You waited," Callie said softly. She laid the blanket a short distance away, spreading it slowly on the concrete. Then she poured water into a bowl and placed it next to the container of shredded chicken. The shepherd watched, unblinking. His coat was more ragged up close, and a patch near his back leg showed raw pink skin where fur had worn away. He smelled of earth rust and damp leaves. "You need a name," she said as she sat on the blanket. "I can't keep calling you, Buddy." The dog inched forward, first his front paws, then his hind legs, until he was within reach. Carefully, Callie extended her fingers. He sniffed them, hesitant, cautious, but did not retreat. "I think I'll call you Bridger," she whispered, "because that's what you seem to be. A bridge between something seen and something hidden." He lowered his head slightly, pressing it against her palm. For the first time, his eyes blinked slowly as though conceding a truce. Meanwhile, several blocks away, Travis Redford finished stacking firewood behind his cabin. He was tall, around 40, with a broad chest and a limp on his right leg that made each step deliberate. His skin was sun-worn, and his beard, peppered with gray, had grown thicker over the winter. Travis had returned to Maple Hollow 3 years ago after serving 15 years in the military, 10 of them in canine operations. Since his return, he kept to himself, rarely venturing beyond the small farmers' market on Saturdays or the VFW hall on Veterans Night. Most folks gave him space. His eyes, a pale steel blue, rarely made direct contact. The war had changed him, and so had what he lost there specifically. His partner, a Belgian Malinois named Rook, who died in an IED blast that Travis survived. As he walked back toward the front porch, his attention was drawn to the street corner. There, across from the bakery, he noticed the shepherd poised and large beside a woman. From his distance, he couldn't hear the words, but the animal's stillness struck him instantly. Not every dog sat like that. Only trained ones, only the ones who had learned to wait, to guard, to serve. Travis narrowed his eyes. He didn't recognize the woman, not immediately, but something about her posture, upright yet gentle, lingered in his memory. Then he remembered Monroe, the sheriff's daughter. Used to play by the department steps with sidewalk chalk while her dad signed reports. He hadn't seen her in years. Back at the manhole, Callie gently poured a bit more water. Bridger drank this time, slow, deliberate laps that made her heart ache. She saw now that his left paw had a cracked nail, and one ear bore a jagged edge as if bitten. There were old scars under the grime healed in crooked patches. She didn't want to touch them yet. Trust would come in stages. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small laminated tag, the kind used on keychains. She had scribbled her number and name on the back. "If you get scared off, I want someone to be able to help you," she said, and carefully looped it around the torn leather collar he wore. It was faded, but still there. Possibly the last thing left from whoever had abandoned him. Suddenly, a voice called from across the street. "That dog's been there since Thursday. Ain't moved much." Callie turned and saw Mrs. Helms, a short, elderly woman in a flowered housecoat and thick spectacles, standing on her porch with a broom. She had lived in Maple Hollow for over 60 years and was known for both her lemon bars and unsolicited advice. "He yours?" she called again. "Not exactly," Callie replied. "I think he's guarding something." Mrs. Helms shook her head. "More likely just hungry. But you do what feels right, dear." As she disappeared inside, Bridger let out a low growl, not at her, but at the manhole again. His ears perked and he inched forward. Callie followed his gaze. For a fleeting moment she thought she heard something, a soft, muffled sound barely audible, like scratching or squeaking. A shiver ran up her spine. She stood slowly. "I'll come back later. We'll figure this out, I promise." Back at his cabin, Travis picked up his coat and keys. Something in his gut told him to go see for himself. His instincts, though dulled by time, still prickled when something was off. He wasn't sure what drove him. Curiosity, memory, or just the look in that dog's eyes, but he grabbed his old Army med pack and slipped it over his shoulder. 10 minutes later, as Callie walked back toward her house, Travis was already approaching the corner where Bridger sat. From across the street, the shepherd raised his head, recognizing the shift in weight, the gait of the approaching man. Bridger didn't growl. He didn't bark either. He simply stood, posture, straightening head, tilting in faint curiosity. Callie from her porch saw Travis and paused, then smiled faintly. She remembered him now. If only in fragments her father's stories, a medal ceremony and a tall soldier with quiet eyes. That night, fog rolled back in thicker than before, but the manhole remained guarded and the town slept with one eye open. Rain returned to Maple Hollow the next morning. In a steady drizzle, soft but persistent, like a conversation the sky was having with the earth. Fog clung to tree trunks, and the scent of wet pine needles mixed with wood smoke from distant chimneys. On the corner of Appleby and Main, the manhole cover glistened, and Bridger was once again at his post. Unmoving, resolute, Callie Monroe arrived just after sunrise, a bright yellow poncho clinging to her frame and boots splashed with mud. She carried 2 thermoses, one filled with chicken broth and the other with coffee for herself. The German shepherd acknowledged her presence with a flick of the ear, but didn't leave his vigil. She set down a fresh bowl, poured the warm broth, and sat cross-legged beside him under the awning of a nearby shop. Despite the rain, despite the cold, it was the same posture, the same unyielding stare into the grate. She leaned forward, curious. Still guarding, she murmured. Before she could say more, footsteps approached. Callie turned to see Travis Redford stepping around the corner. His army green jacket was soaked at the shoulders, and he carried an old duffel slung across his back. He gave a small nod in greeting. "Didn't expect to see you back so early," he said, kneeling a few feet away. Bridger glanced at him but made no sound. "I barely slept," Callie admitted. "Something about him. It doesn't feel like he's just loitering. He's here for a reason." Travis looked into the grate. "Last night I had this memory. There was a base in Helmand Province. We had a dog, Gator, refused to leave a tunnel entrance. We thought he was being stubborn. Turned out there were injured civilians inside. Sometimes they know. Way before we do." Callie exhaled, grateful for the affirmation. The rain quickened, tapping like fingers across the storefront glass behind them. Travis reached into his duffel and pulled out a flashlight. It was military-grade heavy, scratched but functional mind. "If I take a look," Callie shook her head. Bridger didn't move. Travis lay flat on the pavement and angled the light down between the metal slats. The beam cut through darkness, revealing mossy stone puddles of runoff and, further down, movement. Barely perceptible. "But there I saw something," he said. "Small could be a rat. But wait, listen." They both leaned in. Faint, rhythmic squeaking filtered up through the grate, high-pitched and desperate, like the sound of a wind-up toy trapped in water. Callie's breath caught. "They're crying," she whispered. "Something's down there." Bridger stood abruptly, tail low but not tucked ears pointed toward the sound. Then he let out a low, vibrating whine, deep in his chest, followed by a single protective bark. It was the sound of a sentinel announcing a threat, or perhaps pleading for help. "We need to call someone," Travis said, already reaching for his phone. Within 20 minutes, 2 rescue workers from the Maple Hollow Fire Department arrived. One was Jonas Ellery, a lean man in his late 30s with a trimmed beard, olive skin, and calm hands. He was known for being methodical. Nothing rattled him, not even the time a barn collapsed on a wedding party. His partner was Kendall Mays, younger in her 20s with cropped red hair and a tattoo of a compass on her left wrist. She had a sharp mind and a fearlessness that occasionally made supervisors nervous. "Animal rescue, huh?" Jonas said with a smirk as he studied the manhole. "That's new?" "They're alive," Callie said. Her voice edged with urgency. "Something small, several of them. We heard it." Kendall was already unpacking tools from the truck. "We'll need to pry this open. Might be rusted shut." Jonas crouched beside Bridger, who stood silently but didn't flinch. "This your dog?" "Not exactly." Travis said he's more like the one who found them. The 2 firefighters exchanged a glance and nodded. With practiced speed, they slid crowbars between the slats and worked the rusted rim until the manhole lifted with a groan. A gust of damp, foul-smelling air rose as the cover came free. Kendall peered into the exposed chamber and swore under her breath. 6, I count, 6 kittens." Callie stepped closer, heart thudding. "Can you reach them?" Jonas lowered a short ladder into the opening, braced it, and disappeared into the tunnel. The minutes that followed were filled with splashes, low murmurs, and the occasional squeal from below. Kendall handed down a crate lined with a towel. One by one, the kittens were brought up, tiny, trembling, filthy. Their fur was matted with grime, and their mews were hoarse from crying. They looked to be about 3 weeks old, still unsteady on their feet, their eyes huge and uncertain. Callie's hand shook as she reached for the first one, a gray tabby with a torn ear and a belly that shivered violently. "You poor thing," she whispered, wrapping it in the blanket. The others followed too, black one, cream with orange speckles, one dark ginger and one a mottled calico. Each was placed on a warm pad in a laundry basket Travis had retrieved from his truck. By now, a few passers-by had gathered neighbors with cell phones raised, gasping, snapping photos. An elderly woman offered a thermos of warm milk. Bridger stood guard nearby, barking once whenever someone leaned too far into the basket. His posture never relaxed. Jonas emerged from the hole, soaked and muddy, brushing muck from his arms. "That's all of them. Lucky you heard 'em. Another night and they'd be well." Callie swallowed, pulling the basket closer. "We need a vet. I'll drive," Travis offered. He moved with purpose, already. Opening his truck's back seat, Bridger leapt in before anyone could stop him, as though he'd known that was the plan all along. That afternoon, Bridger sat beside the fireplace in Callie's home while the kittens were cared for at the veterinary clinic. Outside, rain continued to fall, but inside the house held a strange glowing quiet, a warmth earned by action and instinct. Callie knelt beside the dog and ran her fingers gently through his damp fur. "You did good," she whispered. "You saved them." Bridger blinked slowly, then laid his head against her leg. It was the first time he had fully let his guard down. He slept there for the first time in days. The story hit Maple Hollow like a quiet storm, gentle, steady, and impossible to ignore. By mid-morning, the next day, the photo of Bridger sitting stoically beside the manhole had made its way onto the town's Facebook group, uploaded by Mrs. Helms with the caption, "Guardian Angel in Fur. 6 kittens saved." Within hours, it had been shared over 400 times, and comments flooded in with heart emojis, praise, and offers to help. Callie Monroe, who had never once been the center of attention, now found herself checking her phone between grading papers and reheating coffee. Messages came from strangers and old acquaintances' offers to donate food blankets, even to foster. One particularly heartfelt message came from a former student now living in Boston. "Ms. Monroe, you always taught us to look out for the quietest voice in the room. I see now you were living it." At her home on Lily Birch Lane, the once quiet front porch now hosted a small collection of donated supplies. A bag of kitten formula from the Pine Grove Market. A handmade quilt from an elderly couple she barely knew. 3 bags of kibble from a teen named Mason who had recently lost his cat. The kindness felt like wind gently filling the sails of something bigger than herself. Travis Redford arrived around noon in his battered pickup, which had once been military green but now bore the faded look of too many sunrises. He wore a navy sweatshirt under a tan utility vest and carried a toolbox in one hand, a folded wire mesh crate in the other. When Callie answered the door, Bridger barked once, low and warm, and wagged his tail. "I figured I'd help you put something together for the kittens," Travis said, glancing at the modest shed behind her house. "Looks like you're running a shelter now." Callie smiled, brushing a leaf from her ponytail. "Feels like it. Come on in." They walked to the backyard, where an old storage shed leaned slightly, its wooden slats weathered but sturdy. Inside was a jumble of forgotten tools, garden hoses, and rusted shelving. Travis examined the space silently, then turned to Callie. "We could clear the left sideline it, with fleece, maybe rig some heat lamps. I've got spares." Callie nodded. "That would be wonderful. I don't know how long the kittens will be here, but they need something warmer than cardboard boxes in my laundry room." They got to work. Callie pulled out old buckets while Travis dismantled a leaning workbench. Bridger sat under the maple tree nearby, watching with his usual calm alertness. Occasionally, one of the kittens now cleaned and fed would peek out from the living room window inside, pressing a tiny paw to the glass. As they worked, the rhythm of the tools and the simple coordination between them gave way to easy conversation. Travis spoke about his time overseas sparingly, but when he did, his voice lowered, like each word held weight he wasn't ready to name. He mentioned Rook, his old K9 partner, and how the dog had once pulled him from a burning Humvee. He died doing his job, Travis said, sweeping debris into a pile. I promised myself I'd never get close to another dog. But Bridger, he's different. Doesn't ask for attention, just gives everything he has. Callie was quiet for a moment. My dad was a K9 officer too. When he passed, I couldn't even look at a German Shepherd without tearing up. Now I'm well, here we are. Their eyes met, and for the briefest moment something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. A shared wound, and the understanding that healing didn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it came through shared silence and the thud of a hammer against wood. Later that afternoon, a soft knock sounded at the gate. A girl stood there, maybe 17, with a timid expression, and 2 grocery bags hanging from her thin arms. She had freckles and a nervous smile. Her blonde hair tucked under a knit cap that had seen better days. "Hi," she said. "I'm Annie. I saw the post online. I brought some towels and kitten toys, if that's okay." Callie stepped forward. "It's more than okay. Thank you." Annie's face lit up. "I lost my cat Juniper last month. He was old, but I still have all his stuff. I figured maybe another kitten could use it." As they spoke, one of the black kittens began mewing from the window. Annie's eyes widened. "Can I see them?" Callie hesitated, then opened the door. Annie slipped inside with careful steps, crouched near the basket, and reached out a trembling hand. One of the kittens, a cream-colored one with amber eyes, climbed into her lap and curled up as if it had known her forever. Outside, Travis and Bridger watched from a distance. "Looks like she found someone," Travis said softly. "Maybe they both did," Callie replied. As dusk settled, the shed was nearly finished. Travis had added a heating lamp, a fresh layer of straw beneath fleece, and even fashioned a small wooden ramp for when the kittens started to explore. They installed a screen door for ventilation, and Callie attached a chalkboard outside that read, "Willow Haven, temporary home for tiny paws." By the time Travis packed up his tools, the clouds had cleared, and a crescent moon shimmered above the pines. Callie stood on the porch. Bridger beside her, his coat now glinting in silver. Travis turned toward the street, then paused. "I'm around tomorrow," he said. "If you need anything." Callie smiled. "I probably will." As he walked off, Bridger laid down on the porch with a satisfied grunt. The street was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel lonely. 3 days after the rescue, Callie Monroe had just finished labeling small jars of kitten formula in her kitchen when a dark blue pickup rolled to a stop outside her gate. It was the kind of vehicle that looked clean only at first glance. Its bumper slightly dented the license plate askew, and one headlight clouded from time and age. A man stepped out tall and broad-shouldered in a black canvas jacket and jeans caked with dry mud. He had sandy blonde hair cropped close to his scalp and a jawline that seemed permanently clenched. The creases at the corners of his eyes weren't from laughter but tension, the kind that simmered beneath the skin. Callie stepped onto the porch. Bridger, who had been dozing by her side, rose instantly, muscles tense. His body didn't lunge, didn't growl, but it stiffened into something cold and ancient. His tail dropped low, his ears pinned back. He didn't move forward, only stood between Callie and the man. "You must be the lady everyone's been talking about," the man said. His voice was slow, gritty with the faintest twang. "Name's Royce Beckett." That's my dog. Callie blinked. Excuse me. The shepherd. He nodded toward Bridger. Name's not Bridger, it's Gunner. I trained him, had him registered even. He wandered off during a storm 6 months back. Saw the photo online. That's him. Callie instinctively placed a hand on Bridger's back. And where exactly has he been for 6 months? Royce gave a short shrug. Don't know. That's what I'm here to figure out, but that's my dog. I want him back. Bridger's body remained fixed. His breathing shallow. His eyes never left Royce's. I think you should go, Callie said firmly. I'd like you to speak with Dr. Lana Hargrove. She's the vet who's been treating him, and animal control should be involved if there's a claim. Royce exhaled through his nose like someone trying not to boil over. Didn't think it had to get messy. You've got 48 hours. Then he turned, climbed into the truck and drove off. No goodbye, no backward glance. That evening, Callie met with Dr. Lana Hargrove at the Maple Hollow Veterinary Clinic. Lana was in her early 40s, tall and sharply built with dark brown skin and eyes that missed nothing. Her lab coat was embroidered with her name in neat blue thread, and she moved with the brisk confidence of someone who'd seen everything from broken paws to barbed wire wounds. As Bridger sat obediently on the exam table, Lana ran her fingers along his spine, lifting fur in careful sections. He's tense. Been, ever since Callie nodded. The man's name is Royce Beckett. Claims Bridger belongs to him. Says his real name is Gunner. Lana's lips thinned. There are signs I didn't mention before. Scarring behind the right ear, old burns along the flank. These aren't from rough play, they're from neglect, possibly. Worse. Bridger shifted at the word, Burns' eyes flicking toward the door. Do you think he was abused? Callie asked. Lana gave a solemn nod. I'd say there's a history, and if this man trained him, it wasn't with positive reinforcement. Callie sat down hard in the corner chair. What can we do? File a temporary hold. I'll write a report. Get the sheriff involved. Meanwhile, I'd like you to keep him out of sight as much as you can. If Beckett has history, it's likely in the system. Travis Redford got the call just after dusk. He stood in his garage polishing the handle of an old shovel when his phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then said, I'll look into it. Within an hour, Travis was logged into an old military handler forum. He typed Royce Beckett into the search bar. A few posts from years ago popped up, including one thread titled Rough Hand Training, New Staff. The comments were revealing. Heard. Beckett's methods raised red flags. Yeah, transferred out of Fort Hollis after 2 dogs went into stress shock. Guy's a walking lawsuit. Travis leaned back in his chair. His jaw worked for a second. Then he picked up his phone and texted Callie. He's not who he says he is. I've got some things to show you tomorrow morning. That night, Bridger didn't leave Callie's side. He lay curled beside the front door, alert to every sound. Callie double-checked every lock in the house. As the wind howled outside and pine trees brushed against her windows, a quiet storm brewed not just in the sky but in the shadow of a man who wanted to reclaim a dog that no longer belonged to him. The morning of the hearing arrived with a biting cold that seemed to reach beneath coats and settle into bone. Maple Hollow's courthouse stood quietly in the square, its pale bricks washed in winter sun, and the air crisp with silence. Callie Monroe approached its steps with measured breath, her arms folded tight over a leather folder. The clatter of her boots against the stone was a steady rhythm, masking the tremor beneath her composure. Beside her, Travis Redford walked with quiet resolve. His olive jacket, though worn, was clean and pressed. In one hand, he carried a simple canvas bag filled with documents he hadn't yet decided if he wanted to use. On the other side of Callie Bridger walked calmly on his leash, his posture alert but collected. The German shepherd's coat had regained its luster in recent weeks. his eyes brighter than the first time Travis had seen them. But today, something in his stance was cautious, as if the dog sensed the gravity of the day ahead. The inside of the courtroom was warmer sun streaking through tall windows onto aged wooden benches. A few townsfolk had already gathered. Annie sat near the back, her coat swallowed by the courtroom pew, eyes flicking from the door to the front with nervous curiosity. Kendall Mays, in civilian clothes, nodded from her seat near the aisle. Even Jonas, the usually stoic firefighter, had taken a morning off to attend. The quiet presence of these people, those who had witnessed the story unfold in real time, offered Callie a strength she didn't know she needed. Judge Clara Whitcomb presided from the bench, a woman of late middle age with silver-streaked hair, tied in a braid down one shoulder, and a face lined not by age but by discernment. She had been on the bench in Windsor County for 2 decades, known for her unwavering fairness and sharp eyes that saw far beyond what was spoken aloud. The bailiff called the session to order. Royce Beckett entered the room with heavy steps, his presence casting a strange weight over the space. He wore the same dark canvas jacket, but his face was harder than before, tight at the jaw, eyes narrowed. In his hands he carried a thick manila folder and a laminated registration card which he handed off to the clerk without a glance at Callie or Bridger. Introductions were made. The nature of the dispute, a contested ownership claim over a male German shepherd, was stated for the record. Royce was called. First, I purchased the dog in question, Gunner, from a breeder in upstate New York. 4 years ago, he said, his voice even slightly grating. He was trained for security work and lived on my property. Went missing after a storm in early autumn, didn't know where to report it until I saw the photo of him online sitting over a manhole. That's my dog. He produced a dated photograph of Bridger in a training harness, along with a scanned purchase receipt and his copy of the dog's microchip record, though the chip, according to Dr. Lana Hargrove's earlier scan, had never been registered properly with an agency. Callie listened, jaw tight. Travis sat beside her, tapping one thumb slowly against his knee. When it was her turn, Callie stood unfolding a paper with shaking fingers. She spoke softly, but with certainty. I never went looking for Bridger. He came to me. He wasn't wandering or panicked. He was stationed at a manhole. He sat there in the rain for days, refusing food unless he could drop it into the grate. And under that grate there were 6 kittens trapped, starving and alive. He saved them, and he stayed by their side until we got help. She handed in her supporting documentation, vet records from Dr. Hargrove, annotated photos of the rescue, and written statements from neighbors. She continued, her voice steadier. In the weeks since I've worked with him daily, he flinches at raised hands, cowers at loud voices, but he's never lashed out. He's not just a dog. He's a soul who's been through something, and he chose to protect instead of hurt. He chose this town, this home. Then Dr. Lana Hargrove was called, dressed in a navy turtleneck and wool coat. She walked to the witness stand and gave her testimony with clinical clarity. I conducted multiple exams. The dog arrived underweight, with visible scar tissue behind the right ear, and old signs of trauma consistent with burns along his flank. These are not consistent with natural injury or accidental scarring. His stress responses were immediate and severe. In my professional opinion, these are signs of long-term mistreatment. She paused, eyes scanning the courtroom. Since being with Mrs. Monroe, the dog's cortisol response has lowered, his coat has improved, and his behavior has normalized slowly but measurably. It is my belief that removing him now would likely undo much of that progress. A low murmur moved through the gallery. Then finally, Travis stood. He walked to the front in long, deliberate strides, standing tall, though his voice came low and restrained. My name is Travis Redford. I served 3 combat tours with the Army's K-9 Division. I've handled military working dogs and I've trained handlers. I know what trauma looks like in a dog, and I know what healing looks like too. He looked at Bridger, who sat quietly beside the bench, his ears flicking once toward Travis's voice. The first time I saw him, Travis said he didn't bark, didn't move. He was waiting for something, maybe someone who'd never come back. He reminded me of how I used to sit after the war. Still tense, not sure what to feel. I live with PTSD every single day. That dog was the first thing in years to make me feel normal. Like I wasn't broken beyond fixing. His voice cracked slightly, but he continued. I looked up Mr. Beckett. His name shows up in handler forums. Not in good ways. Dogs under his care collapsed from stress. I have records of at least 2 serious complaints filed against his training methods. Judge Whitcomb leaned forward slightly. Do you have those documents available? Travis nodded and stepped forward, placing a folder on the bench. Copies of complaints, informal testimonies, and a transfer notice from a base in Fort Hollis. His name's in every one of them. The judge flipped through the folder silently, then closed it. We will resume this hearing tomorrow morning at 9. I'd like time to review this material thoroughly. Both parties are instructed not to discuss the case publicly until a ruling is issued. A soft gavel tap ended the session. As the room emptied, Callie exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour. Bridger leaned gently against her leg as if knowing, just knowing that something important had begun. Outside the sun was high and the frost had melted from the sidewalk, but Callie felt it. The chill of waiting had only just begun. The sun rose with a kind of gentleness that felt intentional, as though even the sky understood the weight of the day. Callie Monroe stood outside the courthouse steps again. Bridger at her side, his fur slightly ruffled by the breeze, but his posture steady. Travis Redford arrived moments later, holding 2 coffee cups. He handed one to Callie without a word, their shared glance saying more than small talk ever could. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was different from the day before. Less tension, more expectation. The same townspeople returned to fill the benches. Annie sat near the front this time, eyes wide and hopeful. Her backpack at her feet. Dr. Lana Hargrove arrived in a charcoal blazer, her presence quiet but authoritative. Even Mrs. Helms showed up again, bringing a tin of lemon bars, which she handed off to the bailiff with strict instructions. No crumbs in the courtroom. Judge Clara Whitcomb entered her robe flowing behind her, her expression unreadable. She adjusted her glasses as she sat, then glanced once at Bridger, who remained silent and alert at Callie's feet. This court, she began, has reviewed testimony. Medical records, behavioral assessments, and community statements regarding the dog who are known as Bridger, formerly registered as Gunner. The central question is one of ownership, but what has emerged is far more complex, a question of care, of recovery, and of responsibility. She paused, then looked squarely at Royce Beckett. Beckett, your documents show prior ownership, but the court finds no evidence of any reasonable search efforts made after the dog's disappearance. Additionally, credible testimony and documentation have revealed a troubling pattern in your history as a handler. Royce's jaw flexed, but he remained silent. Judge Whitcomb then turned to Callie. Ms. Monroe, your actions were not only compassionate but consistent with the standard of responsible animal guardianship. You provided care, medical attention, emotional safety, and purpose to a dog who was once discarded. She leaned forward. This court rules that Bridger shall remain in the custody of Callie Monroe. Furthermore, I am referring Mr. Beckett to the County Animal Welfare Board for further investigation regarding the treatment of animals under his care. A hush fell across the room, then a single sound broke it. Annie's quiet exhale of relief, followed by a small clap, before she caught herself. Callie's shoulders dropped, and she reached down to ruffle Bridger's fur. her fingers tangling gently at his ruff. Outside the courthouse, the town felt brighter, not just because of the verdict, but because of the strange unity that had formed around one dog, and a small act of mercy. Travis helped Bridger into the back of his truck, and Callie followed the courthouse now behind them. 2 weeks later, Callie stood at the front of her classroom at Maple Hollow Elementary. On the whiteboard behind her was a hand-drawn sign that read, "The Kindness Corner. Learn to love. Learn to care." The room had been transformed. In the back, beside a tall window that let in golden afternoon light, stood a custom-built animal corner, a reading nook lined with soft rugs, low benches, and a fenced-off area filled with stuffed animals, care tools, and laminated pet care steps, cards made by the students. A corkboard above it displayed student essays with titles like "Why Animals Need Us Too" and "Bridger." My hero in fur. Bridger himself sat peacefully in the corner, wearing a green vest stitched with the words "Classroom Companion." Ask before you pet. He'd grown used to the attention by now. His ears still flicked at loud noises, and he preferred quiet corners, but with children he softened. One of the black kittens, now 4 months old, and named Maple by a classroom vote, curled beside him, purring with the contentment of a creature that knew it was safe. Miss Monroe asked a boy in the front row, "How did Bridger know those kittens were there?" Callie smiled. "I think sometimes animals hear things we don't. Or maybe they just feel things more clearly than we do. Either way, he chose to help." Travis had built much of the space by hand. Over the past few weeks, he'd quietly become a part of the classroom's rhythm, installing hooks for leashes, helping plan animal awareness activities, even leading a short seminar called "How Dogs Talk with Their Eyes." The students had adored it, not just because of his stories, but because of how he looked when he told them, calm, honest, like someone who had once been broken but decided to teach the pieces how to stand. Callie had also noticed, not just the way Travis carried himself now, straighter, more present, but how Bridger often chose to sleep near his chair instead of the door. One morning, Callie found a small envelope taped to her desk. Inside was a photograph. Bridger and Maple curled together under the window, both half asleep. On the back was a note. "Home isn't where you're found. It's where you choose to stay, TR." That afternoon, Callie took the photo, placed it in a frame, and hung it on the classroom wall right above the Kindness Corner. Later that week, during a parent-teacher event, several parents lingered after the tour. One, a woman named Eliza Garland, tall and broad-shouldered with thick dark curls and a commanding laugh, approached Callie with interest. "I'm head of the school district's enrichment committee," she said. "I think this program you've started could be something bigger, citywide even. You'd have my full support." Callie hesitated. "I appreciate that. But really, it just started with the dog who didn't give up." Eliza smiled. "That's exactly why it works." That evening, Callie stood once again on her porch, watching as Travis helped pack up the last of the school supplies they'd borrowed for the event. Bridger sat between them, his tail thumping softly against the wooden boards. "Think he knows he changed everything?" Callie asked. Travis glanced down at the dog, who yawned, blinked, and rested his head on Travis's boot. "Yeah," he said quietly, "but I think he's more interested in the next thing he can protect." Callie chuckled, but her eyes turned warm. She reached down and stroked Bridger's fur. "Well, this town's full of things worth guarding." Bridger didn't move, but his tail wagged once in reply. The trees in Maple Hollow had turned to gold. Leaves fell like quiet confetti over the sidewalks, and the air carried the faint scent of wood smoke and spiced cider. In the heart of town, just behind the public library, stood a modest brick building with a painted wooden sign that read "The Hollow Haven," a place for pause and people. The building had once been an old post office, but now it breathed new life as a community-run rescue and education center, an idea birthed quietly from Callie Monroe's living room and built slowly with the help of every pair of hands willing to show up. Travis Redford, with his measured movements and quiet focus, had helped lay every plank in the reading loft and wire, every bulb in the play area. Dr. Lana Hargrove donated her time for monthly wellness checks, and every Sunday, Annie, the teenage girl who had first brought towels and kitten toys, volunteered to lead the Little Guardian reading hour for children and rescued animals alike. Inside the center, Bridger lay stretched across a thick braided rug near the window, a soft beam of autumn sunlight painting his fur in a warm amber hue. Around him, the 6 kittens, now healthy, confident, and each named by local children, curled in various spots. Maple, the calico, perched in a hammock above the window. Comet, the black one with white toes, leapt between cushions. Dusty Willow, Rusty, and Peach each had their favorite nooks and personalities, one shy, one bold, one constantly purring. Bridger had become something of a guardian mascot for the haven. He moved gently around the children, allowed curious seniors to pat his head, and watched every new arrival with steady, knowing eyes. He was not the same dog who had once frozen beside a manhole. His gait was looser now, his breath calmer, his heart steady. On this particular Saturday, the center buzzed with quiet activity. A family with 2 young children had come to learn about adoption. A group of college students helped organize donated supplies. Eliza Garland, the tall, dark-haired enrichment director who had first suggested expanding Callie's school program, stood by the front desk laughing with Travis over a mix-up involving 3 bags of kibble and a squirrel that had snuck in last week. Callie, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans speckled with paint, moved between rooms with a clipboard in one hand and a thermos in the other. Her auburn hair was tied in a long braid, and her cheeks were flushed from having climbed a ladder earlier to hang autumn decorations. She paused in the middle of the main room, watching the scene around her. "It's really working," she whispered aloud, mostly to herself. "You say that like you're surprised," said a voice behind her. Callie turned to see Travis approaching, sleeves rolled up a faint smear of dust across one temple. He held out a folded paper, this week's town paper. On the front was a photo, Bridger sitting beside a group of second graders, one kitten sprawled across his paw, all eyes on him. The headline read, "From Drain to Devotion, Maple Hollow's hero finds his pack." Callie laughed, eyes wide. "We made the front page," Travis shrugged. "Small towns don't forget big hearts." They walked toward the back wall of the main room where a new addition had just been installed. A framed photograph blown up and gently backlit. It showed Bridger on the first night Callie had seen him, wet, thin, unmoving, guarding the manhole on Appleby Street. His eyes in the picture were sharp, haunted, and utterly present. The plaque below it read, "Sometimes heroes don't wear capes, they just refuse to walk away." Visitors often paused in front of the image longer than they did at any brochure stand. It reminded them wordlessly of the power of stillness, of waiting, of refusing to give up on something no one else could see. That evening, as the sun began to dip behind the hills, casting long golden shadows through the windows, Callie lit a row of battery-powered lanterns along the bookshelf. A small group of children gathered for the evening story hour. Bridger took his usual place near the front tail, thumping gently as the kids sat cross-legged, leaning into the warmth of the rug. Annie stood with her book in hand. She was taller now, or perhaps just more confident. Her once fidgety hands held the storybook still. Her voice, though soft, was certain. This is a story, she began, about how one quiet act can change everything. Callie sat in the back beside Travis. Her head leaned slightly against his shoulder. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the last light of autumn spread across Maple Hollow like a benediction, and inside, wrapped in lantern glow and laughter, the haven held fast to the truth it had been built upon, that a stray can become a guardian, that broken can become whole, and that sometimes the family we build is the one that finds us when we choose to stay. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or bright lights. Sometimes they wear fur, sit beside storm drains, and choose compassion when the world has forgotten them. Bridger wasn't just a dog. He was a quiet messenger. A reminder that even the discarded and wounded can become guardians of hope. This story isn't just about rescue, it's about redemption, about how God can use the broken to heal others, about how a single act of stillness of watching over something vulnerable can ripple outward and change a whole community. Whether it's a stray animal or a hurting heart, love always begins with the choice to stay. In everyday life we rush, we scroll, we forget to see. But what if just for today we chose to look again, to care again? Maybe the person or animal we're meant to help is right there waiting. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Leave a comment with your thoughts or simply write, "Amen," to stand in agreement for more love, more kindness, and more healing in this world. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, and may God bless each one of you who watches, listens, or shares. Let's build a world where no voice, no matter how small or silent, is left unheard.